Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. We're about halfway through the year, so today we're doing the mid-year free cut tag to take a moment to sort of check in on my reading so far this year and look at the reading I'm going to be doing in the rest of the year ahead. Diving straight on into the first question, because we do have quite a few questions to get through. It's, what's the best book you read so far in 2026? And I didn't have to think about this for even a second, because it's definitely The Red Winter by Cameron Sullivan. This is a dark fantasy story with a sort of doomed queer romance at the center of it, but it follows an immortal sorcerer named Sebastian who in the 1700s got involved with the hunt for the beast of Gavaudan, and then 20 years later returns to Gavaudan to see if rumors that the beast has returned are true. There's a lot more going on here than that, but I just absolutely loved the characters. I loved the mystery plot. There were multiple timelines and they were all like very well connected. It was clear the ways that each of the timelines played into each of the other timelines, so there was never a point where I felt like the story was dragging, and I was super invested in the romance, even though you know from the start it's really doomed, and I just loved every second I spent reading this one. I had an arc of it, and honestly the time between when I finished that arc and when the book came out was agonizing because I wanted other people to be able to read it, and now that it's out in the world, I'm just so glad that other people are able to enjoy this book because I think it's absolutely fantastic. Second question is, what's the best sequel you've read in 2026? And I haven't read any sequels at this point, so no answer for that one. Then our third question is, what's a new release you haven't read yet but you want to? And I had a few things I could have gone with for this one, but I think the one I'm most interested to get into is Strange Buildings by Uketsu. This is the follow-up to Strange Houses, which of the two previous Uketsu books was my least favorite. I still gave it 3.5 stars. I did enjoy Strange Houses. I just liked Strange Pictures a little bit better. But I'm interested to see if Strange Buildings fixes some of the problems I had with Strange Houses, because I felt like Strange Houses just like tied things together a little too quickly, and I don't think the structure worked quite as well because it was giving you answers along the way instead of giving you all of the evidence and then bringing in the solutions. It sounds like, though, that Strange Buildings maybe fixes that problem, because it looks like there's different sections that each look at a blueprint for a different building, and maybe we're going to get that structure more like Strange Pictures, where you get like a full look at a specific piece of the puzzle before you start looking at solutions for the puzzle as a whole. I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to spoil either Strange Pictures or Strange Houses for you, but I'm hopeful that I'll end up enjoying Strange Buildings more than I like Strange Houses, because I do really like the concept of this, and I think that Uketsu is using mixed media in a really interesting way with all of the pictures and blueprints and everything that he's incorporated into the story. So I'm hopeful. I'm excited to give it a try, and if I do enjoy this one, I'm going to keep an eye out for anything else that Uketsu comes out with in future. Our fourth question is, what's your most anticipated release for the last half of the year, or the second half of the year? And I had quite a few, but the three I really want to mention were A Trade of Blood by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is the third book in the Shadow of Leviathan series, also sometimes I think referred to as the Anna and Den mysteries. It's basically like Sherlock Holmes and Watson kind of detective duo, but in a really unique and interesting fantasy world where people have various powers derived from the blood of these creatures called Leviathans, and there's all different types of powers that people might have, but one of our main characters is, I can't remember the name for it, an engraver, I think, which is that he can like remember anything he has ever seen or read, and it's just really interesting the way that he uses that ability to help somebody who like never goes to the crime scene solve the crimes. He's sort of the Watson to Anna's Sherlock Holmes, and I really enjoy their dynamic. I enjoy the way that the world is slowly expanding in the different installments in the series, and I'm very excited to dive into book 3. I also have an arc for this one, and I have been like dying to get to it, but I'm trying to wait until we get to the release month to actually pick it up. Similarly, I have an arc for The Silent Appeal by Janice Hallett. I almost said Jane Hallett. That's not correct. Janice Hallett. And this also comes out in August. These both, A Trade of Blood and The Silent Appeal, both come out in August. And this is the follow-up to The Appeal, which I really enjoyed. Janice Hallett just does these really fascinating mixed media mysteries where you might have noticed I like a mixed media mystery here, but I like the way that she uses lots of different types of media. The original The Appeal was basically all emails, but since that one, she's really branched out and included lots of like WhatsApp messages and flyers and like other documents, and I really like the way that she uses like the way that people talk to each other to hide information, so you're sort of as a reader reading between the lines to figure out what's going on. And I really like the way that she builds up the character dynamics and how that contributes to the overall mystery. I just really love it. I love the characters. Her characters always feel like very well-rounded, and she does a really great twist. Like, all of her books have some sort of twist in them that completely, like, recontextualizes everything you've read previously, and I think she's just really good at writing a great, well-grounded twist. The last one I want to mention is another sequel, which is, these were all sequels, yeah. So the last one I want to mention is Off the Reservation by Stephen Graham Jones, which is a follow-up to The Only Good Indians, which is one of the books that got me into reading horror. It's one of the first slashers that I read, and I'm really interested to see where that story is going to go next, because I feel like The Only Good Indians really, like, has a clear wrap-up. Like, it doesn't really leave itself open for a sequel, but I think this is more like branching off to follow a different character, one of the side characters from the first book. So I'm really interested to see what Stephen Graham Jones is going to do with that setup, and where we're going to go from here with, I think it's Nate from The Only Good Indians. And before I forget, I'm pretty sure that one comes out in October. Our fifth question is, what's your biggest disappointment of the year? And this was another one I didn't really have to think about at all, sadly, because it's The Tomb of Dragons by Katherine Addison. I didn't hate this book. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars, because this is the third and final book of the Cemeteries of Amalo series, which I love. Back in this world, the setting of the Goblin Emperor, with one of my favorite characters from the Goblin Emperor, Thara Kelleher, who is solving mysteries in Amalo, and this one had a lot to deal with from the end of the previous book. There's some major status quo changes at the end of the previous book, and I feel like this book just kind of tossed that all aside and just rammed a completely different story entirely into the middle of it. There's also a romance that feels super out of place and underdeveloped, and it just felt messy. It felt like the author started to deal with the fallout of the second book in the series, and then got this idea for a story that she just could not wait to write, and so shoved that story into this one. But that story is not about Kelleher. He's not really the central character for that, so it felt weird to be following him, because he wasn't really important to a lot of what happened. He does the setup for that story, which involves, as you might guess, some dragons. He's required for the setup of that information about the dragons reaching the Emperor. But after that point, like, he doesn't matter. He's not involved in that. He just spends, like, the last half of the book, actually that's like 2/3 of the book, sitting in a room waiting for things to happen and having conversations with people. Which, you might say, yeah, but that's what the Goblin Emperor is. Yes, but Maya is central to all of the questions that he's having to discuss. Kelleher is just kind of like on the fringes of a bunch of different things that are happening, while the plot of, or all of the plot and the subplots that are set up in the first part of the book are carried out by other people who just show up to, like, fill him in on what's going on. So I felt like it was just disappointing and flat, and not a very satisfying conclusion to the series. So even though I still enjoyed it because I like these characters, I like this world, it was definitely my biggest disappointment, because I loved the first two Cemeteries of Amalo books, and I was really looking forward to seeing how Kelleher's story was going to wrap up, and I don't think this was a good ending for him. Question number 6 is, what is your biggest surprise so far this year? And I have to go with The Wedding People by Alison Espach. This was our most recent book club pick for my work book club. We do one book a quarter, and I read this one across 2 days, like desperately trying to finish it to be ready for book club, and that wasn't even hard because it was so good. I was completely, like, sucked in the whole time, and I was not expecting that because it's outside of what I would normally pick up. It's very, like, literary and contemporary, and I usually don't love books like that. It's not that I don't usually like them, it's that it's not something I would typically pick up. The premise doesn't, like, interest me. But I really enjoyed The Wedding People. We're following this woman who's a professor who goes to a luxury resort with the intention of committing suicide. Except when she gets there, she has this sort of chance encounter with the bride that results in her getting, like, pulled into the wedding and meeting all of the wedding people and getting increasingly involved in their lives. And she, you know, gets to have all these little conversations with different people and learn something from them about, like, the lessons that they've learned in their life and the things that they've experienced. And all of that starts to sort of influence her in how she's thinking about her life and what she wants for herself. And I just really enjoy this. It's very funny. It's very heartwarming. Like, it sounds like it would be really depressing because it's a book about somebody who is going somewhere to commit suicide, but ultimately is a book that leaves you with a very, I think, hopeful feeling that there's a future for Phoebe, just as there is a future for all of these other people who have dealt with all of these things in their lives. And everybody has to kind of grapple with, you know, what do I actually want for myself? And I think that was a really interesting theme to carry through, and I really enjoyed Phoebe's perspective. I thought she was a really fun character to follow, And I liked the way that being the stranger at the wedding gave her this ability to say and do things she wouldn't normally otherwise say and do, and build connections with people that were really unexpected. So I had such a fun time with this one, and I was not expecting that at all, and I'm really glad that book club made me pick it up. Question number 7 is your favorite new author, either a debut author or a new to you author, and I have to go with Carmen Maria Machado after reading In the Dream House. This is an incredibly difficult book because it details her experiences being in an abusive relationship with another woman, but it is so beautifully written and interestingly written because each chapter is like a short vignette looking at her experiences in this relationship through a different genre lens or a different like form of writing. So there's like a fairy tale, there's a gothic horror, there's sci-fi, there's cosmic horror, there's I was trying to think of what else. There's American Gothic. I'm just flipping through a little bit. Dreamhouse's Epiphany, Dreamhouse's Legacy, Dreamhouse's world building, Dreamhouse's set design, Dreamhouse's ambition. Like there's all of these different, Dreamhouse's word problem. There's all of these different like ways of writing about the house being the relationship, which she structures around the concept of like the dream house, because there is actually like a specific house involved in her discussion of this relationship. And so she's using the dream house as a structure to talk about the relationship as a whole. But I really enjoyed the way that she tackled this. It didn't feel like it was a gimmick or like an experiment. It felt like the way she was writing about it was also the way that she was processing her own thoughts about the dream house. And there was also this interesting thing happening with different perspectives. So some sections were kind of essay-like, like it read like a little bit of an academic essay. There's one section about like queer villains that's much more like academic feeling. There's also sections that are written in the first person where she's talking about experiences that she had sort of before or after the dream house that in some way relate to the experiences that she had in this relationship but aren't directly a part of that story. And then there's also sections, everything where it's specifically detailing her experiences in the dream house, those sections are all written in second person, placing the reader in the shoes of like the past version of the author experiencing those moments. And so it was this really interesting structure that I feel like made the story really impactful, and it felt like we're kind of experiencing and processing these events and emotions alongside the author, which I just thought was really brilliant and made this a really hard-hitting, poignant, impactful book to read. So I would definitely read more from Carmen Maria Machado. Like, she's clearly an excellent writer. After that, we have newest fictional crush, and I don't really typically do fictional crushes. It's just not a thing for me, but I did want to mention a character I really like, which is Javier from Hemlock and Silver. He is one of the two guards that is working with our main character, whose name is escaping me, because I read a lot of T. Kingfisher this year, Anja. So Anja is a healer who gets called in to help heal the king's daughter when she becomes mysteriously ill, and she has these two guards that are working with her. Javier being one of them, he's sort of the more stoic one, and I really liked the development of their friendship and relationship throughout the course of the story as she got to know him better. And the way that he was so supportive of Anja, he's just very sweet, and he's not like quick to judge. So like weird things are happening around her, and he is always like looking to her to give an explanation and giving her space to kind of bring him into whatever is happening, instead of trying to either push his way into whatever's happening or like not believing her about what's happening, because there's like very strange things afoot in the castle, and he just like gives her a space to be herself, and he likes and respects her for who she is. He respects her abilities, and I just really enjoyed their dynamic. I love Javier. I think he's a really sweet character, and I was surprised about their relationship. I was not expecting there to be a bit of a romance going into the story, and I just really enjoyed the way this went because it was so like sweet and supportive. And then there's a follow-up question, your newest favorite character in general, and I've got another T. Kingfisher character because it's Sonia from Wolfworm. She is the main character here. She is a scientific illustrator who starts working for this like kind of weird entomologist in the woods, and what I really liked about her is that she's so practical and competent, and she's like thinking through, steps ahead. What's going to happen if I do X? What else could happen from that point? And I think she just reacts to things in such a believable way, but also has a sense of like, well, I'm already in this situation. Yes, it could get worse, but maybe it won't. And either way, I need to have some answers. And so I liked the blend of like curiosity and daring alongside like practicality and kind of wanting to preserve her own safety. I just thought she was like very relatable, and I really enjoyed the way that she built relationships and friendships with some of the other people working for this entomologist and some of the other characters that show up later, which I can't say too much about because that would be spoilery. But she developed some really interesting friendships, and I just really enjoyed reading from Sonia's perspective. Questions 10 and 11, we have to return to previous books that I've already mentioned, because question 10 is a book that made you happy, and I have to go with The Wedding People. I already said that I really loved this, and I liked how hopeful it was. This was a book that I was like grinning and laughing like the whole time I was reading it. I just really, really enjoyed this one, and it did leave me with that like hopeful, happy feeling. And then for question 11, a book that made you cry, I can't get it out from under the stack now, but The Red Winter by Cameron Sullivan. I sobbed when I finished this book, like full-on ugly tear sobbing, and it was so good, and I respect a book that can make me cry like that. Question number 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received, and I am twisting this ever so slightly to show you my favorite cover, because I don't think it's the most beautiful cover. I didn't have any that like really jumped out as like, this cover is beautiful, but I do have one that I bought that was a cover buy, because the cover brings me joy, and it's Love Bites by Lynsay Sands, because, and I've showed this before, but it's got this little bat, and it says, "It'll get you," and it's just a little bat with a rose, and that cover is what convinced me I needed to buy this book, so I have to show it to you now, right? Like, it's not the most beautiful, but it is the best cover I've added to my library so far this year. And finally, we have what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And I have quite a few. I still have quite a few things on my self-destructing books list, which I'll link that video somewhere. And then I also have an arc for A Complement of Scoundrels, which I'd like to get to, in addition to my A Trade of Blood and the Silent Appeal arcs. A Complement of Scoundrels is a heist fantasy that sounds like it's going to be really fun, and it's the first book from Michael Kist, another booktuber here on YouTube, from his new imprint through Bindery, I think it is. I keep forgetting the name of that company. I think it's the Bindery, but his new imprint through the Bindery. First new book coming out from them, and that it just sounds really cool. It sounds like it's going to be a really solid heist fantasy about somebody who was betrayed on that last job and is now back out in the world and wants to get revenge and right the wrongs from that last job gone wrong. So it just sounds like it's going to be a really fun premise, and I'm looking forward to giving it a try. And then finally, I also really want to get to Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. I'm on a bit of a T. Kingfisher kick this year, if you couldn't tell already, and she has another book coming out that is the sequel to Sword Heart. So I'd like to get through Sword Heart this month, actually, because Daggerbound, the sequel, comes out next month. So this is on my July TBR. I'm hoping to get to it very soon. And I think this is also on my, like, priority TBR for the year as well. So this one is probably the most pressing of the books I still need to get to this year. But I also really need to get to the self-destructing books because I have quite a few of them left, and I'm quickly running out of time to read them. So those are probably my most prioritized reads for the rest of the year. So those are all the books that I had to talk about today. Let me know down in the comments below what you would answer to one of these questions. I always think it's fun to see what people are thinking about in terms of their reading at this stage in the year. Like, how have things been going so far? What are you looking forward to reading in the rest of the year ahead? Let me know down in the comments, and I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you give it a like, maybe even subscribe to see what comes next. I'm currently posting at least once a week, and I hope to see you in the next video.